Hey yo, what is up? Welcome to Ninja Geek Games. In this episode, we're going to take a look at this 1565 St. Elmo's Pay, part of the historic epic battle system from Tristan Hall, which is set around the Great Siege of Malta. This is a 1 or 2 player asymmetric card game where each player takes control of a unique deck of cards that represents the Ottomans or the Order of Malta. During the game, players play cards from their hand to build their army, and these cards provide certain effects and bonuses. However, the main use of these cards is to provide resources as well as might and zeal that are used to progress through various objectives and ultimately claim frontier cards. The game is won by one of 3 ways, which is either claiming 2 of the 3 frontier cards, destroying your opponent's leader, or if your opponent's deck runs dry. Now this is a game actually based on real historical events where Suleiman's the Magnificent's 30,000 strong armada descended upon just 500 Knights of St. John and the people of Malta. So you get to learn something as you play. Now let's take a look at the contents. Now this is the majority of the contents in the game, and the game comes with 2 decks of army cards represented in green or red, and each of these decks represents either the Ottomans or the Order of Malta. Each player will also take control of a leader card, and there is a small separate deck of objective cards, and these here are the frontier cards that you'll need to claim to win the game. Each army has a specific colour for their damage or wound tokens, and there are some zeal and might modifier tokens as well. Each of the army decks that you control is made up of various numbers of card types. In the top row here are some of the units that can be found in the game, and these can be artillery, ranged, infantry, navy or cavalry. Characters represented in this second row are represented by individuals who command your army, and the leaders at the bottom here are characters who actually start the game in play. Note that if any time that your leader is destroyed, you lose the game. Each of the cards has a resource value shown in this red seal icon here, and to play a card from your hand you need to meet this cost either by using this green resource icon from cards in play, discarding cards from hand, or a combination of both. Now all cards enter play in this ready position, and to use their resource you need to tire them. Although this generates resources, it does however prevent you from using that card's action ability as well as its zeal and might value, which is used for progressing through objectives and trying to claim the frontier cards. Here you find the card name and traits, as well as any available actions that the card has. If a card action is used, the card is again tied for the rest of the round. Each card will have a zeal and might value, which is shown by a cross or a cannon icon, as well as a health value that represents the number of damage it can take before being destroyed. Other cards you'll find in your army deck include event, tactics and attachment cards. Now event cards here at the top represent twists that can affect you or your opponent in some way, and also have a one-use effect. You can use resources in play or discard cards from hand when paying their cost. When tactics cards enter play, they do so in a reserve area and have some ongoing effects like providing resources or preventing some damage during the game. At the bottom here are attachments, and these are played onto the battlefield but are associated with army cards. They provide enhanced capabilities such as increasing the unit's might value and remain with them until that card is destroyed. Now in the games I've played, I've used the whole deck of army cards when playing. However, there is a variant where you can select a minimum of 50 cards to make up your deck, but this does mean you can run out of cards sooner. Each player has an objective deck including 7 cards and they're labelled A to G. Before players can attempt to claim any of the frontier cards in play, they must first progress through their objective deck, which is attempted in the last phase of the round. To do this, the player first looks at the objective's battle attribute that will show might or zeal as its value, as shown here. Then they sum up the total value of that attribute from all cards ready in play. If this value exceeds the objective's battle attribute value, then the card is dealt damage equal to the difference. Now if this damage equals or exceeds the health value of that objective card, it's destroyed, revealing the next card. Also, destroying an objective card provides a bonus, and each player has a different objective deck, and therefore using resources and card actions should be considered carefully, as if they're tired they cannot contribute to their battle value. These are the frontier cards that sit in columns in the centre of the table. Each side is where army cards are played, and each of these sides has imaginary lines making 3 rows with 3 columns. As cards are played, they can be placed in any of the frontiers, but must be placed on their army side, and so that no gaps are left. Here, I can't place a card in this frontier because there are already 3 cards in play, so it can only go here or here. Now, assuming the leaders aren't destroyed and no decks have run dry, players can enter the frontier phase. The frontier cards themselves essentially do nothing. However, depending on how you've prepped your army, frontier cards can take damage with the aim to be claimed by one player. Now, to be able to deal damage to a frontier, you must have progressed through your objective deck so that the last card, the Great Siege of Malta, is active. To deal damage via might combat, both players must have their Siege of Malta cards ready. Then each player totals the might value sum of all ready cards in one frontier. The player with the highest value wins, dealing damage equal to the difference. However, if the result is the same, then each player places 1 damage token on that frontier card. This is repeated for all 3 frontier cards, and if one player has placed enough of their coloured damage tokens to equal or exceed value on the card, then they get to claim it. Then players get to repeat this process for all remaining frontiers, but for Zeal Combat. However, here there are a few differences. Firstly, this phase takes place only if one player has revealed the Great Siege of Malta objective card. But here, even though both players do total the sum of the Zeal value, only the player who's revealed the objective card can score damage to the frontier cards if they win. Player who hasn't reached their Siege of Malta card yet wins the Zeal Combat, nothing happens, they just prevent the other player from adding damage. Also, regardless of who wins the Zeal battle, there is only ever 1 damage dealt on the frontier card. Lastly, if there's a draw for Zeal Combat, each player places 1 damage token only if the values are over 0. So that's a brief overview of the contents and how the cards interact during the game. The game can also be played solo, and for this setup, the enemy starts the game with a few specific cards on the battlefield, and you and the AI take turns taking actions. The AI system is very clever, where they can play cards if available resources allow. And this is achieved through this resource style, where you select the difficulty level at the start of the game, and each turn it provides the enemy with a number of resources on top of those available in play. Now, the solo game plays extremely well. The enemy slowly gains more and more resources as the rounds progress, allowing them to pull and play more expensive cards. So it's very true to a 2-player game in that respect. The cards drawn follow a priority list of exceptions for placement rules, and which abilities can be used, when they can be used, and how the cards can replace those already on the battlefield. And it does have you flicking through the rule book at first, however it does get familiar very, very quickly for smooth gameplay. Now, the solo play can be quite challenging, but it is very rewarding. For solo and 2-player modes, I use the suggested draw variant, so that each round I draw 3 cards from my deck and discard 1 from my hand. Now, this drafting mechanic, I think, should be the preferred method of play, as it stops you being stuck with a handful of expensive cards that you can't use, and also provides more tactical element. For instance, at the start of the game, it allows you to get multiple cheap cards in play, and later on discard others for resources, where the ability or the card won't benefit you at any time. The use of resources and abilities of cards in play provides a dilemma and needs careful forward planning. Yes, it's nice to use resources to buy extremely powerful cards and abilities to damage other cards or frontiers for a slight advantage in the game. But you then need to determine how this affects progress through the objectives, or the ability to deal damage to the frontier cards, as you can't use the might or zeal values with tied cards. Every card also has flavor text, providing a bit of information on tactics used in the siege, events, or who the character is and what they achieved during the battle. Now, I think this is a massive part of the game, as it really helps you relive the horror and historical events of this siege. Some of the cards provide story text of famine, plague, and others go on to full Game of Thrones mode, where heads of enemies were catapulted over to the opposing army, and this is all true. I actually think this game would make an awesome historical movie, and clearly Tristan and Hall or Nothing Productions have done their research here. The game is gritty, powerful, and Tristan Hall has done it again. how they keep providing game after game with exceptionally high production and replay value is beyond me. For those that really enjoy this, I do suggest looking at 1066 Tears to Many Mothers, as well as going online and looking at Scum of the Earth. That is currently in development from All or Nothing Productions. Now, whether you play solo or two-player, this is a really, really good game. The use of a single card, whether resource or ability, can affect how you progress to revealing objectives or trying to claim frontier cards. Trying to progress too quickly means you're unlikely to make use of their powerful abilities and the powerful cards in play. However, if you focus too much on using card abilities, for example, you can then find yourself behind, meaning your opponent can start damaging frontier cards even before you get there. Lastly, the rulebook is less than 10 pages long. It's well written and easy to follow. Also, as the game is fairly fast paced and exceptionally quick to set up, you'll find that you can have 2 or even 3 games in quick succession. So you could even play a best of 3 without eating up time for a really enjoyable gaming session. This is Ninja Geek Games. Thanks for watching.